Kia ora tātou. Welcome back, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating, to be moderating this final panel for our conference, and we're really blessed to have some amazing speakers join us this afternoon. Is it this afternoon? No, not quite. So today, we're just really blessed to have you all here today. And what I'm going to do is just basically invite each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and just sort of tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, how you came to be in the sort of Indigenous trade or Māori business and trade sort of sector. And if you like, sort of offer some thoughts on sort of Indigenous trade and where we're at with it and where we're heading to. So, yes, so perhaps we'll start over here.
Kia ora tātou, ko Peter Lucas Jones tōku ingoa, no te au pauri ngai takoto te rarawa me Ngāti Kahu ahau. Tuatahi e mihi ana hau ki te mana i te whenua, e whakaro ana hau ki te Kāhui ariki, me mihi hoki ahau ki te kiingi Māori, nōna tēnei wāhi, me ngā whakahaeretanga e pāna ki ngā haukainga me ngā wākainga o tēnei takiwā. E mahi ana hau i te ao reo irirangi Māori, ko au te kaiwhakahaere o te reo irirangi o te Hiku o te Ika. Kei roto hoki a hau i te kāhui o ngā kaitiaki o te runanga nui o te aupauri, ko taku tūranga i reira ko te heamana o tērā o tātou runanga. Nō reira tēnei a hau ka mihi atu kia koutou. My name is Peter Lucas Jones, and I come from the very far north. I run our iwi radio station, Te Hiku Media, based in Kaitaia. My iwi a te aupauri, ngai takoto, te rarawa, and Ngāti Kahu. I live in a little place called Taipā, and I went to Awanui Primary School, which of course is in an area of Aotearoa that has more than 70% Māori population. So when you think of the very far north, it looks and feels very different to many other places in Aotearoa. And when I think about those differences also draw my attention to what makes us unique in our expression of our identity. And as whānau hapu and iwi, we're very closely connected in the ways that we think, which of course are Māori ways of thinking, and connected to our involvement with our marae, which there are 47 marae in our iwi radio broadcasting area. And when you think of Te Hiku o te Ika and all those marae, we're reminded that marae are often the centre of our communities, and how the experiences on our marae are often our first business experiences. We're trained in the rules of meetings from a very young age. We're trained around how to participate on boards from a very young age. And just being Māori is a political statement in itself. And the fact that we survive and speak our language and promote and develop ways to encourage the intergenerational transmission of our language and culture is a business in itself. And so I often think about the unsung heroes when I think about the business that I'm involved in. And so the business that I'm involved in, of course, is Māori language broadcasting, and iwi radio is the tuākana, or the senior, of all the different siblings that make up the Māori broadcasting family. And that whānau of Māori broadcasting includes 21 iwi radio stations. It includes Māori television, whakaata Māori, and it includes the family or whānau of Māori production companies that create content. And when we think about content, I'm talking about digital content. And so our journey over the last 30 years as an iwi radio station, it serves as a monument to those that fought hard and continue to fight hard in the critical Māori rights movement. And I hark back to the 1970s, to the 1990s. Our iwi radio station was established in 1991. There were those that were earlier than us. And the vision of our old people was to ensure that our language was not just an academic experience, but it continued to be a method of communication. And so that is part of the value and principle lineage that we carry in the work that we do. Today, we have a huge archive of Māori language stories that we have captured over the last 30 years, talking to our kuia and kaumātua, capturing stories about every maunga, every awa, every one, every opportunity to encourage people to talk I roto I te reo te kāinga. He mea no te kapo I ngā kōrero o te hau kāinga I roto I te reo, e kawe ana I roto I te kauta, I roto I ngā wāhi e mahi ana, te hunga e kōrero ana I te reo. And for us, that was really working closely with the older people. Now, we're working live video streaming, manu kōrero, 4 days last week. What is that? That's a digital asset. Who does it belong to? Belongs to the whānau hapu and iwi. Digital real estate is what we concentrate on now, developing digital real estate. We run a data science project. We were awarded $14 million to teach computers how to speak Māori. Hei whakaako I te rorohiko ki te kōrero I te reo Māori. We've created speech-to-text technology that works at a 10% error rate, first of its kind in the world, lead from Kaitaia. Known by Pākehā people as the murder capital of New Zealand. And I think we have to flip the script sometimes, because every opportunity to tell our story must be told by us. We're now creating synthetic voices, text-to-speech, in te reo Māori, corpus gathering. We know how to do it. Often people ask us, where's your Pākehā hiding in the back room doing all the work? Well, I'll tell you what. We are not just the Māori language speakers and mātauranga Māori experts, we are the scientists, the data scientists. And I just want to come back to mention the Kāhui Fund, because as part of my introductory comments, I want to acknowledge that it was the Kāhui Fund that, of course, is part of the Spectrum claim, that was an allocation of $30 million that was invested into Māori digital entrepreneurship, creating high-value jobs for our people. I come from a place where it's quite different to, Remuera or something like that. But we pay the highest rates, of course. Remuera pay less rates than us, but that's another kōrero. But it's all about power and privilege as well. And if Kāhui had not had the foresight to invest in us, we got $250,000 to create the first ever speech-to-text system for te reo Māori, and we did that because other Māori people believed in us. Other Māori people gave us a chance. Other Māori people created a space for us to fail and learn from our mistakes and do better the next day. And that's what's brought me here today, because if we can't back our own, who's going to back us? Kia ora mai anō tātou.
Kia ora. Jules, if we could move to you, and if you could introduce yourself. And
Kia ora koutou, ka aku mihi kia koutou katoa. Ko Julie Paama-Pengelly tōku ingoa. No tauranga moana ahau. Ko Ngaitirangi tōku iwi. Ko Ngaitu Whiwhia, Ngāti Tau iti, Ngāti Tapu oku hapu. Ka nui aku mihi kia koutou katoa. I'm really happy to be following a conversation about te reo revitalisation because I operate in ngā toi Māori space. And just to give a little bit of background to that space, I guess where I've been the most active is in the initial revival of skin marking or tāmoko. As the only wahine that worked in that space so many years ago, over 30 years ago, there were significant challenges, and I just want to acknowledge Annette Sykes for her saying that you never give up the fight, because now I can look back and I can look at what the work has actually contributed to in that space. So even though being Māori means doing extra work, revival means extra work, continually fighting that battle line means extra work, we do it for our legacy. And, and I'd like to acknowledge Moana Jackson in that way as well. And as I walked into the foyer, I'm reminded that we're in an art gallery as well. And Emari Karaka has been at the forefront of that, that large contemporary art movement. And I'm actually a child of that movement in a sense. These people were my mentors. CNZ just released a report today talking about how they tracked the media in 2021 to 2022. And it was good to see that, key infiltrators in the system actually featured highly in terms of media. I think Elizabeth Ellis, who worked for CNZ for years, who's worked like a zealot in that space, instigated Waido Art Gallery, Māori Art Gallery up north. She rated as maybe the fourth most important person in the art media in general. So I don't want to draw away from, what's actually happening in that mainstream space. But what I want to do is talk about how important it is and how we've been maintaining our sovereignty as Māori artists, as Māori in the art space through our Indigenous interactions. I became interested in Indigenous when I was in the plight of Indigenous peoples in our connection, when I was actually a student and I was stupid and I got a free trip to Fiji during the coup. And of course, students like to party. So that was the focus. But when I got there and I saw firsthand the tourism, and secondly, the front line of colonisation where impoverished families were paying $4 for a bottle of Coke instead of growing their traditional foods. And I sat in the lap of one of the elders in Fiji, and I suddenly realised why, art mattered so much and why our relationship with Moana Nui a Kiwa is so important. And that's a relationship that I've tracked right throughout my career as an educationalist, heading an art school, as teaching Moana Nui a Kiwa papers throughout universities, and finally within my own interpersonal relationships, and I've been lucky enough to be on Creative New Zealand delegations to the South Pacific numerous times, which if you've never actually followed one, I think it's Hawaii 2024, they're massively important, as agents of trade and relationships. So I'm a business owner. I sit really uncomfortably in that. I looked at the other sort of bios and they said CEO. And I remember having to talk to some business owners, to Māori business owners, and kind of track why I actually entered business. And why I entered business for myself is I spoke to a Māori woman who had a humble shop, and she said to me, I said to her, why are you in business? And she said, I have my own autonomy, I can employ my family, I'm responsible for my own success and failure, and I can give primacy to Māori things. And I thought, wow, that sounds cool. And since education just kept dealing to Māori, and the restructuring and everything else just seemed to not contribute to mana motuhake for Māori in that space, I thought, I'm going to open a business. It was probably the silliest thing I did, but when I look back over 12 years in business, I run a studio, In that studio, I have like maybe 13 practitioners of different art forms. And in the back of that studio, we've activated Te Tuhi Mareikura Trust, which is what I'm here to talk about today. But the great things about, and this is Māori in a business space, it's understanding that we're different in that space. What I enjoy about that space is I can apprentice artists, I can influence young people, I can embrace them when other people can't. I don't have a formal qualification for entry or exit, and what they do is they enter a world of, you know, a Māori world. For what I present to the world, you know, it's an inviting space. They don't realise, and I think contemporary art works in this form as well, they don't realise that they're entering a space that is Māori. And I think that's, you know, our active engagement in that way is one of the ways that we've learnt to activate our mana motuhake as Māori. So I'm not a good business person, I don't make any money. And the reason I don't make any money is because Te Tuhi Mareikura Trust was formed in 2015. And I give my energies to that. And one of the things about working as a Māori trying to push a legacy is that all that creative work, I would challenge you to say, it's happening outside those things that are funded, outside those things that are getting this great $1 million purse. All that energy and creativity is happening anyway. And we've got all these other challenges, and I think Maria referred to it before, is we're wading through all this other shit just to do what we're naturally good at doing. So the Trust has a regional, local, regional, national and international strategy. And the strategy that we're most proud of is our international one. Because the reason we work in the inter-Indigenous space is whakapapa. It's plain and simple. Even if we track all the way back to Alaska, to America, we all have a whakapapa to the whenua and to the sky and to everything in between. And that's the commonality that, even though we have many differences, that our Indigenous people share with us. And then if we go, you know, more directly, you know, our navigators have taught us that we share common ancestry all throughout the Pacific, right around the Pacific Rim, and in and out of all the mainlands. And so that whakapapa, when we're struggling as Māori here, if you've ever sat in a pan-Indigenous forum, of which many of you probably have, you feel like you've reached home. You know, there's a different level of comfort. And so that inter-Indigenous relationship, it's pre-existed any talk about trade, you know, any formal talks about trade. And one of the things about, you know, I like to take my hat off to CNZ because they've done a lot of work in the space. But there's a lot of unmeasurables that are happening. And even the contribution of art to the space is not a measurable that sits easily with statistics. So the other point that I want to make is that throughout history, the Western definition of art, while we've leveraged really hard to be acknowledged as creators, ongoing creators of art in digital spaces and new media and everything that involves, the tendency for forces to put us into boxes like CNZ, or sometimes it's heritage, or sometimes it's trade, doesn't work for our definition of art. And this is where the challenge of language comes in. I challenge you to think about where we were before we had a written language. And before we before we were colonised and history was written down, our art served as way more than something pretty. It always moved with the people. It was a device for us to communicate with each other, our histories, to our atua, to our whenua, to our rangi. You know, it helped us transmit everything. And if you put it in the box of Western definition of art, and then you go, what are we trading? Then you've actually limited what the actual benefits are. So just gonna Play the video.
Yes, we've got a little video.
A little video.
If we could play that now,
Introduction.
please.
Being visual, you've got to have a video. No acronyms, just videos. Has he got the signal?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay, I just played that video as a bit of an introduction to one of our international profiles as a trust. Te Tuhi Mareikura has been doing international delegations for maybe 10 years, preceding when we actually became a trust. And in 2018, we visited Tahiti as a delegation of 30 artists revolving around the skin marking. And one of the important things about skin marking is you can't separate it from the people, unlike a piece of art. You know, what Te Māori taught everybody is where our art moves, is where our people move, because it's about communicating our values, our spirituality, everything. It's activated. So when we went to Tahiti and we explored that whole origin story and our relationship with Tahiti and Taputapu Ātea, and we came back and the feedback from all the Indigenous people that were attending there, and we took artists as well as moko artists, was that they looked to Aotearoa. They looked to Aotearoa for how they handle the revival in many ways, language, toi, etc. And we decided that we were going to host an international Indigenous moko festival. And this is about the development of mātātua, Ngaitarangi, Ngāti Ranginui, Ngāti Pūkenga arts. You know, this is about our development. We're an iwi-driven development space. And in 2018, we had 3 months to organise it. We had $3,000, and we had 16 Indigenous nations presented, and we turned on a 10-day Wānanga festival. And in our model, and in this particular festival, we modelled partially on a tattoo festival because we wanted to create an Indigenous space in the tattoo festival and say to the festival, stop touching our taonga. This is what it looks like in an Indigenous context. So what you see in that video is some of the things that happened in both spaces. But we also acknowledge that Indigenous people are not tourists. They want to be welcomed by the Indigenous, but learn more about us than just visitors learn. So we embrace the marae as a safe forum for just us as Indigenous people to share everything else that goes with our toi. And the breakdown in that, we offered it for 2 years. That was 2020. That was our second year, which we ran on 8,000. The breakdown in that is that the festival organisers, we just about boycotted it on the last day. The festival organisers wanted us to pay for everything, wanted us to step up and do all those performances and all those things, while they paid everyone else from all around the world to fly in, and they didn't value what they got. And they started being aggressive towards some of our practitioners and their wider art space and what they could put there, and yet we were clearly the draw card. Interestingly enough, we voted not to boycott it because that would not uphold our mana, but to no longer go down that mainstream route. So now this year we'll be in our second year of iteration as doing the whole festival ourselves. And what I want to gather from that is that it's really important that if you want to help us in inter-Indigenous trade, is that you allow us to do it. That you don't tell us, to be that voice on behalf of you, that you allow us to be that voice on behalf of you, the other way round. Because the benefits that you could be having are exponential. These relationships are reciprocal. We've had artists go over there and lead things. We've got exhibitions over in Vancouver next year. These are the real value of what we bring to that space as artists. And in terms of what you can do for that space, you can support things like toi iho, where we actually hit the business space and we say, we put the brakes on and we go, no, this is authentic and that's not. Where can you help us in that trade space? You can fund us in a way that is mana enhancing. When Creative New Zealand says, oh, you don't have a track record, and I'm not talking about myself, oh, you don't have a track record, our markers have assessed, and it's like, you go to our communities and you ask about the track record. We've done this for 8 years on nothing. So go to our communities, see us in our communities, and then tell us about track record. And then I just went to the Toi Ora conference, so I'm fresh on the arts, what the national thinking is for Māori on the arts. And the key things that came out of it is we've been upholding Māori sovereignty in Ngā Toi Māori for a long, long time. And we continue to do it despite our lack of help, But if you want to help us, you're either on the journey or you're not, because we're going to keep on doing it anyway, because what's at stake here is our legacy. And once again, I'm drawn back to Annette, and I'm drawn back to the speakers of the previous day, and I would say to you, if you're going to support, then it has to start at the relationship level. And that's what Ngā Tōki Whakarururanga does. You've got all the heavyweights there. Why would you go and replicate those structures? Give the chance for Māori to have mana motuhake over that.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. E mea tuatai kei te mihi atu ana ahau ki te kingitanga atu hei te pōtatau te wherohero me tōna hōrangatira. Me te whānau hānui o te whānau paki, tai atu ki Waikato, Waikato tainui, taino ki tēnei whenua a tātou e tūake nei. Nō reira, tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou ngā kai whakahaere o tēnei kaupapa, he kaupapa whakahirehira, he pai hoki ngā kōrero kua puta mai, ko wai ahau, ko Wayne Tamarangi Mulligan ahau, he uri ahau no Ngāti Mani o Putu, he uri ahau no Taranaki, arā ko ngā maanga tairi, tai atu ki te whanganui ātara, te atiawa Taranaki whānui, tu atu ki te tau ihu, te atiawa Ngāti Rārua, anō reira tēnā tātou. Wayne Mulligan, my philosophy on life is why join the merchant navy when you can be a pirate. I got that from my whanaunga down here. The brute reality is I like doing things differently. And everybody has tino rangatiratanga. I've got 5 sisters, so I know that. I hear it every bloody day. But on a serious note, I was at the free trade signing agreement between New Zealand and China. I was at the free trade agreement for ASEAN when it was signed in Bangkok. I've been trading for 20-something years. I'm a proud person because there's one thing I dislike, and that is poverty. I'm sick and tired of Māori people, Polynesian people, having incomes less than 20,000 or 20-odd thousand. And those household capacity annoys me. And it annoys me when we talk and we don't do something. We've never had more capital than we've ever had before, and we're applying it to elements that are not generating real strong wealth. And if wealth annoys you, then I'm an Irish Māori. It's the Irish side of me annoying you. I've invested in lots of science and technology, not because I'm a scientist or because I'm a technologist. I did study at university very poorly. I was the guy looking for 51%. I'm very productive, Ganesh. What's my pass line? 51. In politics, where's 61 sit? That's all I need to talk to. And I did my master's in systems thinking and complexity. So I love it when people say, I don't get what you're doing. I go, well, that's good. That's one less competitor I have. And that usually gets that response, right? And they say, well, what do you mean? So I'm going to give you an example. I take, and Kiri Waitangi is in there, I take kiwi fruit that is not exported and I convert it into a globally recognised prebiotic that won the Global Prebiotic of the Year. Right? Because I've learned the gut-brain axis is really important. Your gut and your brain are where all your microbes. We are walking bacteria and carbon. Some of you are more beautiful than others. I'm an outlier. So I was investing in gut health years ago, and everyone says, oh, so you're trying to make everyone have a tickle. But the brute reality is that you have to understand, just like the earth, and everyone talks about environment and all that, you have to understand that our bodies are the same as the earth. We're made up of microbiomes and bacteria, right? And we've got to be able to understand those sorts of things. Things that can nourish them, things that can. So investing in that, the Canadian lady about the smoke, I invested in a berry and built a berry company that converts berry into a lung health that breaks the microfraction that builds up in your lungs to help you breathe. We did that because we were sitting in China, in Beijing, and I go, shit, this is pretty bad, isn't it? Why can't we do this? And that's my mindset. I go, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? We have this, there's all this research done in CRIs and university. Let's just go and grab it and commercialise it. And when they tell me, oh, they want the IP, I said, there is no IP until it's intelligently positioned, that's what IP is, in market. All you've got is something sitting in a bloody cupboard, creating no value, which you've spent money on, all right? And then you're chasing the next funding. So that's another thing. We're taking Feed Joa and we're doing a Feed Joa play on helping with diabetes, right? Lowering glycemic index. That's a challenge for me because I also invested in another plant-based food with 13 other Māori. And we didn't need to go to our iwis and all that. We just put our money in and said, let's just do this to create a food formulation out of plant-based to lower glycemic index. We were going to do a large 2,000 clinical trial in China and about a 500 human clinical trial in Singapore. COVID came. But at least we did it. You know, this is. So I'm just trying to give you a picture. We've taken Kānuka honey and let everybody cannibalise themselves about Mānuka. We tried to help the people protect Mānuka about 15 years ago, so you need to protect this. But they're all going UFF this and plus that and plus this. I said, you're going to confuse the godsend of the market, right? You're just going to confuse the market with all these different categories. And so we've done that, and we've done the clinical trials on killing bugs. So rosacea, cold sore, we went head-to-head with Zavirax. If we're going to be big, let's go head-to-head with Zavirax. Why Zavirax? Because it was coming off patent. Why was that important? Because I don't know any CEOs or CFOs that wants to get cannibalised, because once it comes off patent, right, the patent's out there, then you're seeing all these new cold sores creams called Zaviron and all these sorts of things. It's just copy. And I said, you've invested in this brand. Why don't we give you a natural product brand that is clinically evidenced? It's been done here and peer-reviewed by the Mayo Clinic. Why did we choose the Mayo Clinic? Because we're focusing on the pharmaceutical market. We're not focusing on the food market. And so that's the way I see things. And now I'm really clever because I used to pick pine cones in the Wairarapa where I grew up in Featherston and sell them. I'm now converting Pinus radiata back into its molecular chemistry. And why am I doing that? Because if we're serious about reducing plastics, fossil use, and petroleum, then have a look at the resources we can scale in New Zealand. Do we like Pinus radiata? Not really, but it's going to be here for the next 70 years, and 40% of it is wasted per annum in the whole process. Then you've got the wood chips. What are we doing with the wood chips? What are we doing with the cardboard? We reconvert those back into chemistry. So 1 month ago, I signed an agreement with a Japanese company to help them build biosolvents. They are a global refining company in the automobile, the EV batteries, and the semiconductor market. And if you don't know what semiconductor market is, then just check out your phone, your laptops, and what drives all of those sorts of things. So for me, I focus on, from the input, where can I get the maximum return for my team so we can do more business. So a log might sell for about 120 or 100 New Zealand dollars. A cubic, roughly a tonne, cubic metre. You start working into the chemistry and you're around $5,000, $10,000. Yes, it costs a lot of money to build the infrastructure and all that. That's my next goal, is to go out to the global capital and raise the money to factoring in here. Because here's my secret, I'm telling them. Nature's solutions grow here, in Aotearoa. I have a dream that New Zealand and Asia Pacific will be the home of green innovation. And I have a dream that more Māori and Pacific Island kids will become those data scientists, those analytic drivers, proud of who they are, and know that we are helping the world move from a fossil base to a petroleum base.
Kia ora.
And so I'm dumb enough to give it a go. Will I succeed? I think so, because the international markets I'm working with have told me. And the final point I'll do with this is that grab your cell phone, right? Just grab your cell phone. That cell phone's got printed circuit boards, it's got materials and chemicals driven by energy, and I'm negotiating a deal with the company that makes that to create the bioadhesives that holds that bloody thing together. I reach across the table in discussions in Taiwan and Japan with my clever scientists, and these guys say, this is the chemical schedule we want you to make, Wayne, from the biochemicals. I say, yeah. Of course I can say yeah, because I don't understand it. Of course I'm going to say yeah. You must don't know how to send a rocket up into the space. But what I do know is that we've built the chemical building blocks to make these things happen. Then it becomes an issue of timing and investment to make it happen. So koe rā te whakaaro o tēnei tangata te uri no te raukura me te waka o tainui, mihi kawana kia koutou e hakarongo mai nei, e roto i te kaupapa whakahirahira. But let's be proud to be Māori, and let's be proud that we can help our kids and our grandkids get a better future. And living on commodities and statements and reports does not put an extra dollar in their back pocket in their household. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Peter.
Oh, kia ora tātou. Look, there's a question here, and I do want to respond to it. How do trade agreements and trade policy enable inter-Indigenous trade? I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it does, because illegitimate laws created by an illegitimate government are never created to enable Indigenous people in any way, shape or form. So, I mean, let's wake up to that straight away. And I say that because, some of these questions draw our attention to the work that we do. And the work that we do is often associated with challenging the power, privilege, and control that is associated with the patterns of thinking that are connected to whiteness. And when we think about Aotearoa and what that means in policy development, in discretionary decision making, those agreements aren't set up for us. Those agreements were never set up for us. So I think we need to be sure that we are leading. Now, the kaupapa at te reo irirangi o te hiko o te ika, we understand intimately that data is the new gold. Data is the new gold. Now, there is no data science project without the data. Why did we achieved something that nobody else had achieved. AI, machine learning, teaching computers to convert Māori language speech to text. Text, converting it to speech, taking into account all the intimate knowledge of our haukainga about te reo Māori. Why did we do that? Not just because we can, but because we must, and we will. Māori kaupapa must be led by our people. It must be led by our people, and we must be an example to others in our community, because together we rise. Together we rise. And when I think about that, it's really important for us to remember Pākehā advantage in all of this. Pākehā advantage needs to be talked about. What is Creative Commons as a license? What is it? What is open source technology? And why do we, as Te Hiku Media, not contribute all and sundry in terms of our APIs, our developments, our technologies to open source platforms? We've created many digital platforms. In fact, we saved every dollar that we could. We were going to build a beautiful whare like this, but then we realized that 86% of our people don't live in our haukainga where I live. In fact, they're citizens of the world. The closest they get to home is a screensaver either on their phone or on their computer. So how do we digitally connect our people that have been alienated from language, culture, and our land, and our moana, all of that sort of stuff? We've decided to put those dollars into creating a digital whare kōrero. Pull your phone out, whānau. And I want you to go to the Google store, the Android, whatever, if you've got an Apple, and search for the whare kōrero. Do it now, whānau, while I'm talking. Do it now. Okay. Search for the whare kōrero. Because the whare kōrero is access to the 21 iwi radio stations. We invested $400,000 in the development of that app. We won, Te Hiku Media, we won Best Open Source Technology Award in a business in Aotearoa, not a Māori award, up against the Pākehās. Hey, we go and win their award and just remind them. Hey, we remind them. And now I want to tell you something, and download that. The next one, the other one that we created is the Rongo app. That's about pronunciation and restoring native sound. And I'm talking about the difference between a maunga and a maunga. I'm talking about how to increase our proficiency in Māori language. Now, pronunciation is so important, and it's all right to give it a go. I encourage everyone to give our reo a go, but the idea is to improve. And so the Rongo app, that's R-O-N-G-O, rongo. Now, why did we... Yeah, korongo, korongo koe, korongo tātou. And at the end of the day, pronunciation is so important. Why? Because pronunciation, if it's poor, it obscures the meaning that we are trying to communicate. And we must support one another in improving our pronunciation. When a non-Māori person makes the effort to pronounce Māori words properly, what does that tell me? That tells me that that person has a respect for te reo Māori. If they have respect for the Māori language, then perhaps they might grow a respect for the Māori culture. Right. And if they have a respect for the Māori culture, perhaps they may grow a respect for the Māori people. Mm-hmm. And we're on a mission here, whānau, and none of these agreements are here to support us, do our mahi. They may at times be levers that we can pull, but let's not pretend that they're more than that. Now, I'm going to go to, I've been invited to go and talk at this conference about Creative Commons over in Mexico in October. And I said, oh, I want Taihoa, I've got my relations. They want to come too. There's actually quite a few of us from the very far north. Yeah, we like this hui, it sounds wonderful. But the moral of the story is we do things differently. So we've developed our own data license. It's called the Kaitiakitanga license. And it's about putting into text our practice that we've been doing for 10,000 years. And it comes back to our values and principles. Our values and our principles, our tikanga. And the first rule is do no harm. So all our technologies, they're not allowed to be used for surveillance. They're not allowed to track our people. So we have a whole different approach to licensing our software, licensing our APIs, licensing our speech technology. Why? Because my father went to school and almost had the language beaten out of him. And so too did his 18 siblings. But our grandmother, you know, bless her soul, he wahine kōrero i te reo Māori, tērā tana reo tuatahi. Nā reira i roto i tō mātu nei haukainga, kei reira anō ētahi o ngā whānau e mautonu ana i te reo Māori. And that has been a special gift. And I think about those old ladies, our grandmothers and our kuia, because they had values and they had principles. And we've been trying to bring those values and principles into our data license agreement, which we have yet to launch. But open source technology is great for white people. It's great for Pākehā because Pākehā have had the opportunity to learn and to be educated in how to use those tools. I don't know how many people walking down the street in Kaitaia know how to use open source technology. And so what I mean is we are part of a pathway. We have to create high-value jobs for our people, and we're going to have to ask non-Māori to deoccupy that space so it can be populated by those that have a right to be there. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Nice. Deoccupy.
Awesome. We got any question time or kupo? Okay. Kia ora tātou. Well, it looks like we're actually out of time. And so apologies, this app thing here, if you've sent a question in the app, it's offline. So yes, so do come and see our panelists over lunch, and just want to just ask us all to please thank our wonderful panelists for their contribution today. Kia ora.